The greatest act of courage is not slaying the dragon or crossing the threshold into adventure. It is the quiet decision to step away from the crowd that once defined you. This is not misanthropy, nor is it the bitter withdrawal of the wounded heart. It is something far more profound, something the myths have whispered across millennia, but which our modern world has forgotten in its desperate hunger for connection. You have felt it, haven't you? That moment when you realize that the conversations swirling around you touch nothing real, when the laughter feels hollow, when the very relationships you once treasured begin to feel like elaborate performances in which everyone has forgotten they are acting. This is the call to adventure that Joseph Campbell mapped across 1,000 cultures, but it is not the call we expected. We thought the hero's journey would begin with trumpets and fanfare, with a wise mentor appearing at our door bearing gifts and prophecies. Instead, it begins with a whisper, a growing awareness that the ordinary world you inhabit is not ordinary at all. It is mechanical, scripted, a vast theater where everyone moves according to invisible prompters, speaking lines they never chose, playing roles they never auditioned for. By the time you reach 30, 40, perhaps 50, you begin to see the patterns, the same conversations repeated in endless variations, the same fears dressed in different costumes, the same hungers seeking the same empty satisfactions. You watch people chase approval like moths around a flame, never noticing that the light they seek is burning them. You observe the careful choreography of social interaction, the unspoken agreements about what can be said and what must remain hidden, the collective conspiracy to never look too deeply at anything that matters. And in that observation, something stirs within you. Campbell called it the awakening of the heroic consciousness, but it feels less like awakening and more like a slow, inevitable isolation. Not the bitter isolation of the rejected, but the necessary solitude of one who has begun to see through the veil. You find yourself stepping back, not in anger, but in a kind of mystified wonder. How long have you been sleepwalking through this carefully constructed dream? How many years have you spent trying to fit into shapes that were never meant for you? This stepping back is not a rejection of humanity. It is the first movement in a dance as old as consciousness itself. Every mystic, every sage, every truly awakened individual in the history of our species has had to make this movement. They had to leave the village, literally or figuratively, not because they hated the villagers, but because they could no longer pretend that the village's dream was their own. The hero's journey does not begin with a sword or a quest. It begins with the courage to stop pretending that you are who you have been told you are. It begins with the recognition that beneath all the roles and masks and carefully maintained personas, something real is waiting to emerge, something that can only be born in solitude, in the fertile darkness of your own unwitnessed becoming. The call to adventure, when it comes, is not a voice from the heavens or a burning bush. It is the growing discomfort of living a life that no longer fits. You begin to feel like a snake trying to remain in a skin it has long since outgrown, and every movement brings the painful awareness that you are constricted by boundaries that once provided safety, but now threaten to suffocate you. This is the threshold moment that Campbell described, but he understood what our modern world has forgotten. The threshold is not a place you cross once, but a state of being you must learn to inhabit. The ordinary world calls this solitude loneliness, and it will use every weapon in its arsenal to pull you back into the collective trance. Friends will express concern. Family will question your choices. Society will whisper that something must be wrong with you if you prefer your own company to the endless chatter of groupthink. But the myths know better. They know that every true hero must spend time in the wilderness, must face the dark night of the soul, must learn to hear their own voice above the cacophony of other people's expectations. This is not the loneliness of the abandoned. It is the solitude of the initiated. You are crossing a threshold that most will never even see, entering a realm where the rules that govern ordinary social interaction no longer apply. Here in this space between worlds, you begin to discover who you are when no one is watching, when no applause awaits, when no external validation can reach you. It is terrifying and liberating in equal measure, like learning to breathe underwater or discovering that you can fly. The silence that once felt empty begins to fill with something you had almost forgotten existed. Your own authentic voice, rusty from disuse but growing stronger. With each day you refuse to speak the lines others have written for you. You begin to understand what the mystics meant when they spoke of the pathless path, the journey that can only be taken alone, not because others are unwelcome, but because the destination is so fundamentally interior that no one else can accompany you there. In this solitude, you are not becoming a hermit. You are becoming yourself. You are not rejecting connection. You are preparing for the only kind of connection that can truly nourish the soul. For when you eventually return to the world, and you will return, you will carry with you something that cannot be faked or borrowed or learned from books, the unshakable knowledge of who you are when all pretenses fall away. If these words are stirring something within you, if you recognize yourself in this ancient pattern of departure and return, then you are already part of a fellowship as old as consciousness itself, a community of individuals brave enough to walk alone until they discover what it means to truly walk together. Join this circle of modern wayfarers by sharing your own moment of recognition below. When did you first hear the call to step away from the crowd? What threshold are you crossing right now? The journey into authentic solitude is not a pleasant stroll through scenic countryside. It is a descent into the underworld of your own psyche, where all the shadows you have spent a lifetime avoiding are waiting to be faced. Campbell knew this, which is why every heroic tale contains a period of trials, of tests that seem designed to break the hero's spirit. But these trials are not punishments, they are initiations, each one stripping away another layer of false identity until only the essential self remains. In your solitude, you will meet aspects of yourself that polite society taught you to hide, the anger you learned to swallow, the dreams you were told to abandon, the wild parts of your nature that were domesticated so thoroughly you forgot they existed. You will face the shadow of your unlived life, all the paths not taken, all the words not spoken, all the authentic responses you suppressed in service of keeping the peace. This confrontation is unavoidable, and it is sacred work. The world will not understand your transformation. People who once knew you will say you have changed, and they will not mean it as a compliment. Some will try to pull you back into the roles you are shedding, using guilt, manipulation, or simple bewilderment as their tools. They mean no harm. They are simply protecting the collective dream that your awakening threatens to disturb. But you cannot unsee what you have seen, cannot unknow what you have come to know about the mechanical nature of most human interaction. Yet in this apparent isolation, something miraculous begins to happen. As you become more authentically yourself, you begin to recognize others who are walking the same pathless path. Not many, true recognition is rare, but when it happens, it is unmistakable. There is no need for pretense, no careful negotiation of social boundaries, no performance of acceptability. You meet each other in the space beyond roles, and the connection that forms there is unlike anything you experienced in the ordinary world. These rare encounters teach you what Campbell meant when he spoke of the return of the elixir. The gift you bring back from your journey into solitude is not withdrawal from the world, but the capacity for genuine relationship. You have learned to be alone without being lonely, to be present without being needy, to love without attachment to outcome. You have become someone who can meet another person exactly where they are, without trying to change them, or use them to fill some emptiness within yourself. The paradox is complete. Only by learning to be truly alone do you become capable of being truly together. Only by stepping away from the crowd do you develop the clarity to see which individuals within that crowd are also listening for the call to adventure. If you have felt the shock of recognition as these words find their mark, if you understand the sacred loneliness of the authentic path, then you are not as alone as you might think. Share this moment with others who are walking the same inner journey. Let them know they have found a companion in the work of becoming real. The return from the heroic journey is not a homecoming in the ordinary sense. You do not simply pick up where you left off, unchanged by your descent into the depths of your own becoming. You return, transformed, carrying within you a quality of presence that makes others pause even if they cannot name what they sense. You have learned the most paradoxical lesson of all: how to be fully in the world without being owned by it, how to participate in the dance of daily life without losing yourself in its endless choreography. This is what the mystics have always known, that true freedom lies not in escape from the human condition, but in the capacity to move through it with awareness, like a lucid dreamer who can enjoy the dream precisely because they know it is a dream. You can engage with the mechanical aspects of social life when necessary, but you are no longer imprisoned by them. You can play the required roles without forgetting that they are roles, speak the expected words without losing access to your authentic voice. The solitude that once felt like exile has transformed into a portable sanctuary, a place of peace and clarity you can access even in the midst of chaos. You have become what Campbell called the master of two worlds, equally at home in solitude and in company, equally capable of depth and surface engagement, depending on what the moment requires. This is not duplicity, but wisdom, the hard-earned knowledge of when to reveal your depths and when to honor others' capacity to receive them. People sense something different about you now, though they may not be able to articulate what has changed. There is a quality of unhurried presence, of someone who has made peace with themselves and therefore needs nothing from others, except the joy of authentic connection when it arises naturally. You have learned to love without desperation, to give without keeping score, to be present without attachment to outcome. The great irony is that in learning to be alone, you have become infinitely more available for genuine relationship. In releasing your need for others to complete you, you have become complete enough to offer something real. In accepting your own company, you have become the kind of person whose company others genuinely seek, not for what you can give them, but for the quality of presence you bring to any encounter. This is the elixir, the treasure the hero brings back from their journey into the unknown territories of the self. Not withdrawal from life, but engagement with life from a place of wholeness. Not rejection of others, but the capacity to meet them without agenda, without the desperate hunger that masquerades as love, but is really just another form of taking. The hero's journey, as Campbell understood, is not a destination, but a way of being. The ongoing practice of remaining awake in a world that prefers to sleep, of staying true to your authentic nature while moving with compassion through the dreams and illusions of others. You walk among them, but you are no longer of them, and in that sacred difference lies both your gift and your responsibility.